Hi there. So my name is Tarn Ream, and I am bringing you to an undisclosed location in the Rattlesnake Valley of western Montana. And I am bringing you here to show you this plant that I've been studying for about 20 years now, called the Trillium. And it's also called wake robin because it's one of the first. As you can see, there's not much up. It's not much green out. As you can see, it's one of the first plants up in the spring, so it's called wake robin. But it's also called Trillium because, as you can see, it has 3 leaves and 3 petals, 3 white petals, and 3 green sepals. So everything's sort of in 3 with Trillium. And it's also called Bethroot, as Native Americans used it for after women gave birth. And it's a very potent medicine, so it's not something that anybody would want to use on their own because it's actually quite poisonous. I'm going to introduce you to my awesome friend Taylor Craig. She's here to help me today with gathering data. And she is holding up a tablet that we actually use to gather data nowadays. And you can see how tall this is a pretty tall Trillium, pretty big size one. Gives you an idea how big it is. Taylor also has data sheets that I used to use, and as you can see, it shows all the different plants that I look at, and we fill in all those blank spots, and that's a heck of a lot of data to collect. So this site has 1,320, well, actually more than that now, plants at this site here that we're at, and I have a couple other sites where I work as well. So you can see there's 29 pages of data sheets there. As you can see, it's kind of a lot of work to do this research because I have to crawl through all these sticky pokey things. Here's a sticky pokey gooseberry, and there's sticky pokey hawthorn here. Oh, look at this. Here's a really beautiful one. So I wanted to show you this Trillium that has a little bit of pink on it. It has just a tinge. And some of these Trillium never get pink, but some of them get a little pink, a tiny bit of pink, and some of them go really dark pink. And I wanted to show you this really cool insect on it. I often see these on Trillium, and I don't think they're pollinators, but they probably give the crab spiders a good meal. A lot of times crab spiders live on these Trillium, and they blend in because they're either yellow or white, or a little bit of both yellow and white, and you can see why they would blend in on a Trillium with all that pollen and the white petals. I thought I'd show you a few more plants in their variation of pink. Here's a little bit darker one and a lot darker one. And some researchers believe that this is sort of advertising to the pollinators that the plant has already been pollinated and doesn't have any pollen available. So that's a really interesting thing to think about. But I'm not sure. Some people think it's because the plants have gotten cold. This plant shows that it got, the flower, you can see it got a little frosted because the color is sort of brown on the edges. There's a lot of variation. So when I look at these plants, what I do is I will take the measurements and I will measure. I've got my grandmother's measuring tape for, see that? And I will measure how long the leaf is and how wide the leaf is. And that gives us a good indication of plant size, because actually size of plants is more important than the age of the plants, because they need to gather enough nutrition in order to bloom, as well as make seeds. So I wanted to show you some of my plots and also talk a little bit about the life history characteristics of Trillium plants. These plants bloom and then they make some pretty large seeds. So the seeds are about the size of a small, I don't know, like a BB or something. And they are big and heavy. And they often drop to the ground. And when they drop to the ground, they don't last, they don't stay for very long as a seed bank. But it takes them 2 years to germinate, because the first year, the root grows, and then the second year, the shoot comes up. And this is the first year that it comes up out of the ground, are these little skinny things called cotyledons. And then the next year, they have one-leaf plants, which I showed you earlier. Here's a couple one-leaf plants. Here, there, and these are tiny. And then they graduate to a little bit larger three-leaf, which this is actually a smaller three-leaf. And then they get to bigger three-leaf and three-leaf and three-leaf for years, until in Montana, my research showed that it takes about a minimum of 18 or 19 years until that one individual plant blooms. And sometimes, some years they take years off of blooming. So, for example, there's a plant that might bloom one year and then not bloom the next year. These plants do not self-pollinate, generally speaking, so they need to have some kind of pollinator come and pick up pollen and take it to another plant. And as you can see, at this site, the plants are pretty close together, so the pollen can be moved pretty easily. There's not a lot of research done on the pollinators, and some people think that they're bumblebee pollinated. I did some studies to see if they had any night pollinators, and I didn't find any. I think there's a lot of little beetles that come in and move around and pollinate them. The other thing about Trillium reproductive biology is that they do need to be pollinated and make seed and sprout, because they do not reproduce via their rhizomes or their roots. So, and the reason that I could study how old they were was because I exposed some of the rhizomes to show the rings on the rhizome. It's a very unusual method of being able to check age, but I was able to expose some of the rhizomes that are very much like iris roots or iris rhizomes, and count the rings on them. So they do need to be pollinated and drop seed. And the other thing about dropping seed, so I showed you these little babies are all kind of clustered together, but the seeds have what is called an oily food body that is attached to them. So it's called an elaiosome, and the elaiosome attracts ants and wasps and maybe some other critters that we don't know about, but ants come and they pick that seed up because it has that yummy oily food body on it, and they take that seed away with them to their ant hills, and they'll eat that oily food body, but then they'll drop the seed on the ground or in their stashes where they're garbage pits actually, and sometimes the plants will grow up from there. And also deer will eat the seed capsules. So these plants form these seed capsules later in the year, like in July, and the deer will eat the seed capsules and carry them away. And this research has shown that the seeds actually survive through the digestive tract of a deer, and they can be dropped a very long distance away from where they started. Okay, I'm going to show you a bit about my plots here. I use these small PVC pipes to make a quadrat that's 1 meter by 1 meter square, so that each of the different plants has a coordinate, and so I know individual plants, and that's why you can see the labels, they have numbers on them. Those are the ones that are blooming plants. The ones that are not blooming I don't label because there's too many of them. But I just wanted to show you this. It's kind of cool. I'm getting down here under this big plant, and you can look and you can see I said that those cotyledons take 2 years to sprout, and then they become one-leaf plants, and then they become these tiny, tiny, tiny little 3-leaf plants. See that little tiny thing? So the one-leaf plants, and I'll show you kind of different sizes of one-leaf plants. Here's a small one, and here's a larger one. So they may stay in this stage for years, like maybe 5 years or more, getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger until they become little 3-leaf plants. And then the little 3-leaf plants, you can see the differences in size here too. They change. And so I follow each of these plants through time so that I know what they're doing and how big they're getting, and so I can kind of track what each plant is doing. So I'm Tarn, and now you get to see me. Oh, there went a little chipmunk through our plots. Okay, I'm Tarn, and we're back. I just had a chipmunk run through the plot, and so I got distracted, but that happens every once in a while. I have rough grouse go through, and that actually brings me to talking a little bit about the habitats. You can hear the creek behind us, maybe. Sometimes you can hear the Townsend's warbler. Sometimes you can hear rough grouse drumming in the springtime. I once had a whole bunch of little rough grouse chicks run through my plots while I was working. Trillium grow in western Montana, and they don't grow east of the divide, and they need a little bit of moisture and a little bit of sunlight, but the moisture is really the most important thing. So they grow in what's called mesic forests. This particular species is called Trillium ovatum, and you saw the leaves. They're sort of egg-shaped, and that's why they're called ovatum. And it is the only species that is native to Montana of Trillium. Trillium species in general only grow in North America and in Japan, and the closest relative is called Trillium grandiflorum, which basically looks exactly the same, and it grows in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And this particular Trillium ovatum, when it grows out on Washington and Oregon, it's called Pacific Trillium, but it's the same species. And Montana is as far east as that comes, so it grows in the western part of the states, and then up into British Columbia, and that's pretty much the range. So part of the reason I started studying it because it lives a long time. I thought that was really interesting. One guy actually aged the plants to be 72 years old. And I have a feeling that, in my oldest one, I think I aged it somewhere in that range, but I think that they probably get to be maybe around 100 individual plants. So a lot of the little babies die, and the older plants obviously live for a really long time, and that's what's called basically called a long-term life history strategy. So the idea is that the adult plants live for a very long time, and even if the babies don't survive as well as some maybe other kinds of plants, over the long term there's still plants. The problem with that is that there could be, like if somebody went in and decided to just plow a whole bunch of area where Trillium were growing, or some kind of disease went through, or people decided to come and dig them up, then what happens is you have absolutely no plants coming in, and those long-term plants are gone, so there's no way for them to grow new babies. So it's a really interesting life history strategy that many plants use, but it has costs and it has benefits. So it's a cool thing though. It's hard to imagine a plant living to be about 100 years old. It's just sort of mind-blowing. So that's one thing that really interested me in these plants. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what a mesic forest looks like. So you hear the creek right next to us, and I can't even see it because the brush is so thick. I'll pan that way. Maybe you can see some sparklies in the, probably not though, that's the creek over there. But oftentimes what we're looking at is spruce forest, and I have Taylor standing next to this spruce tree that has been carved out by carpenter ants, and I'm just gonna scan up this tree. It's a very, very big spruce tree. See that? And then in the tops, you can see that there's some Douglas fir. There's some larch in here. This is a little bit different than some of my other sites. My other sites have grand fir, and yesterday you saw a lot of this understory coverage. So we have a little bit of Doug fir and a little bit of larch and spruce in this particular site, and a lot of Rocky Mountain maple and hawthorn and things that grow down in the near creek bottoms. I'm glad you could join me today to take a look at some of the Trillium. I call them the charismatic mesofauna because I think people really like them, but the more you know about them, the more you respect them and appreciate, you know, how long they've been around and what it takes to actually create a Trillium population. I was actually supposed to do a walk with the Montana Native Plant Society Clark Fork chapter. Today is the 8th of May, and I was going to do it around this week, and things changed due to the current situation with virus, and so there are probably going to be a number of other things that are, you know, people might be doing videos and that sort of thing, but go ahead and look on the Montana Native Plant Society website. There's other things going on, and check it out, as well as other resources around Montana and Missoula area. MPG will also be doing a video with a really talented botanist, so you can get information from that as well. So I just wanted to thank you for joining me, and when you're out in the woods and you see the Trillium, give them a little shout out for me. Say hi.